Good morning. My name is Gerald Patterson, and I'm speaking to you from Greenfield Park in West Allis, Wisconsin. It's a beautiful October morning, October 20th, the year 2021, and the sun is starting to come up in the horizon. I was my mother's third baby in 3 years. It's true, I was my mother's third baby in 3 years. And my parents were intelligent and enlightened people. They accepted me as I was, a punishment from God. When I was a child, I have to admit I was a pest, and I was pestering my mother a lot. And when I was a child, I asked my mother if I was adopted. And my mother said, "Not yet. Not yet, but we placed an ad." Well, that's just a joke. But it is true, when I was a child, I was a pest, and I was not only pestering my mother a lot, I was pestering my 3 sisters. But one of my sisters learned how to stop me in my tracks. She would say to me, "Grow up." Grow up was like a punch in my solar plexus. Grow up, put me on the defensive. And you know, I've been on defensive all my life about growing up. And even though I'm much older now, I'm still working on it. I'm still working on growing up. And so it's no surprise to me that the theme of my talk today and my theme of my book is growing. And you might say, why the topic of growing? Isn't growing for young people? Here we are, all grown-ups. And I'm sure we've all been through a lot in our lives already. Why the topic of growing? Well, the growing I'm talking about is what Dr. Scott Peck, the famous psychiatrist, called the growth of the human spirit. He says the growth of the human spirit is so important. He says the growth of the human spirit is the end, the reason for human existence. So what do we mean by the growth of the human spirit? Well, as I see it, the growth of the human spirit means growing stronger and healthier mentally, emotionally, psychologically, socially, and spiritually. This type of growth is for people of all ages. We never outlive our need for the growth of the human spirit. Now, I was in a church school hall many years ago, and there was a plaque on the wall that said, it was a quotation, short quotation from Cardinal John Henry Newman. It said, "Growth is the only evidence of life." And more recently, I came across a quotation from the same man. He said, "To live is to change, and to change a lot is perfection." James Allen says, men and women are anxious to improve their circumstances, and yet they are unwilling to improve themselves. They therefore remain bound. I was in a library many years ago, and I remember reading a quotation from Johann Wolfgang von Goethe. Johann Wolfgang von Goethe said, "Everybody wants to be somebody. Nobody wants to grow." Why is it that nobody wants to grow? Well, growing is not easy because it takes courage and self-discipline. Growing is not the path of least resistance. As I see it, the growth means facing challenges. Growing means dealing with problems head on. Growth means with accepting responsibilities, and growth comes with getting out of our comfort zones. So this is not easy. Why should we as grown-ups continue to try to grow? Well, Dr. Scott Peck, who I mentioned before, asked the same question, but then he answers it right away. This is what he says. Why desire to evolve, to grow at all, you may ask? If you ask the question, perhaps you do not know enough about joy. Joy is the payoff. There is joy in growth. And St. John Paul II said, every human heart is made for joy. Joy. Now, I was reading about trees and tree roots, and no matter how big the tree is, no matter how tall the tree is, no matter how old the tree is, the roots keep growing. When the roots stop growing, the tree dies. Now, you could say that we human beings have inner roots, and when our inner roots stop growing, we die inside. Now, I did a little research and I put together a list, collection of quotations, the best of the best quotations related to the theme of growing. And I put these quotations along with my comments on these quotations in my own book. It's called The Growth of the Human Spirit. In my book, I have only about 200 quotations, more like maybe 250 quotations. And this morning I'm going to recite all 250 quotations for you. No, I wouldn't do that to you. Just kidding, I wouldn't do that to you. But I would like to give you just a few quotations from my book. Strength, growing in strength. Oh, do not pray for an easy life. Rather pray to be stronger men and women. Philip Brooks. Courage. Always do what you are afraid to do. Ralph Waldo Emerson. Goodness. Unless we live up to the spirit of goodness, we live down to the level of mental slavery and moral mediocrity. Ralph Sockman. Maturity. Growing in maturity. One of the sure signs of maturity is the ability to rise to the point of self-criticism. Forgiveness, growing in forgiveness. He or she who is devoid of the power to forgive is devoid of the power to love. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Love, growing in love. It is impossible to love without giving. Richard Bronstein. And it is only those who do not love that go empty in this world. Robert Hugh Brown. I'm going to skip to the last chapter of the book. The last chapter of the book is called Growing in Faith and Hope. And in conclusion, I'd like to give you four short quotes from Jesus, reassuring quotes from Jesus. Jesus says, I am the light of the world. He who follows me will not walk in the darkness, but will have the light of life. And Jesus says, these things I have spoken to you, that my joy may be in you, and that your joy may be made full. Jesus says, Jesus says, I will not leave you orphans. I will come back to you, and your heart will rejoice. And finally, Jesus says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. Now, I gave a friend of mine a copy of my book, and he said, I will waste no time in reading your book. Now, you can take that two ways. I will waste no time in reading your book. I'm doing a little self-promotion today. My book, The Growth of the Human Spirit, is available on sale for $9. That includes shipping and hand, includes everything. And I recommend my book as a gift for someone you love. Someone you love, or the people that you love, have a birthday every year, and they celebrate Christmas every year. And I recommend this. It's a small gift, but it's a nice gift for someone you love. And if you're interested in my book, ask that you please send a check for $9 to this address. Hope you got that. And thank you so much for joining me on this beautiful morning.